bigeze aho umugabo rimwe aza kundeba mbona arababaye arambwira ati reka nkubwire ikintu cyambabaje ese wababajwe n'iki ati niba umbabarira uzambabarire ninjya kumarira abana
My mom's body was maimed. I couldn't understand how they could kill her. Then I was told by one young man that my entire family was killed. I had 11 brothers. No one is alive besides me.
The 2 o'clock news, they said there was a bombing, and my wife said that someone saw Smadari going down the street, and you start looking for her. Eventually, you find yourself running in the streets, going from hospital to hospital. Later that night, you find yourself in the morgue, and you see this sight which you will never be able to forget for the rest of your life.
It was certainly the most devastating attack so far inside the city walls. There could hardly have been a more pointed prelude to the other main event of the day, a huge peace march in the Irish Republic by contingents from north and south who've had enough of this kind of violence and worse.
In 1984, we targeted the Grand Hotel in Brighton, where the Conservative Party were holding a conference.
My sister woke me up and said, "Which hotel is Dad in? There's been a bomb in Brighton. It's on the news."
In that operation, 5 people were killed, over 30 people were injured.
How dare anybody think their need to be heard is so important that they've killed my father?
People talk about the pen is mightier than the sword. I think that's true, but I think that the spoken word and the spoken story is even more powerful than the pen, because I think it goes further and deeper into the psyche of human beings. Sometimes people tell stories and all they do is tell their own story. That's not enough. You have to tell your own story, but you also have to hear the story of the enemy. You have to tell the story of the people that you have fought with and argued with and perhaps killed. You have to tell those stories.
A short while ago, it was confirmed that one of the dead is the MP for Enfield Southgate, Sir Anthony Berry, who was Treasurer of the Royal Household.
I was caught for that operation and sentenced to 8 life sentences with a recommendation that I do 50 years before being considered for release, but was released after 14 years due to the peace process.
Emotional family reunions for Catholic prisoners, most from the Irish Republican Army. Among their number, convicted bombers, snipers and murderers.
It was just after Patrick McGee had been released from prison that I actually began to feel the anger and the rage. How can someone play God, you know? And now he's free and I'm left with it. And, you know, no one's need to be heard is so great that they should kill.
getting out, I mean, the first thing is to get your life back in some semblance of order. And then, out of the blue, I was contacted by Joe Barry.
I wanted to put more attention and energy as a part of me than was to find alternatives to blaming, because then I'd stay a victim forever.
I think Joe wanted to meet me to understand why her father died. I thought one meeting, say what I have to say, which would have been, I suppose, a defence of what I did in terms of politics, but also, show some sensitivity towards her and perhaps express regret at the loss, and that would be it. We'd part and that would be it.
I remember sitting in my friend's kitchen in Dublin and knock at the door, and I knew it was Pat, and I was in such a state of anxiety and kind of, should I be here even, doubting whether it was the right thing to do. And he walked in and I got up and shook his hand and thanked him for coming. Part of me was thinking maybe he won't turn up. He said, no, I want to thank you. He was very, very polite. And I remember looking at him and thinking, you've killed my dad. The first hour, Pat talked a lot about the struggle and why he joined the IRA and defending his use of violence. And I was listening and asking questions and telling him about my father and what had happened to me since then. And after about an hour and a half, he stopped talking and he wiped his eye and he said, I don't know what to say anymore. I don't know who I am. And in that moment, I think part of me wanted to run away because I thought I realised that this was the beginning of another journey.
I'm still trying to come to terms with the fact that somebody who who have killed her father, is still prepared to come and listen to me and to talk to me and to respect my point of view.
He'd opened up and it was no longer just him defending himself. He'd become vulnerable and we were starting something together.
I think there was a need felt from both of us to meet again. As if, we'd left the conversation short. There was more to talk about. We must have been in similar circumstances some 50 times. It doesn't get easy.
Teacher training college established, well, it's about 100 years old. And then a variety of colleges. Please welcome Joe Berry and Pat McGee.
Would you class yourself, or would have been classed as a soldier or a terrorist?
I can understand, after all the decades of misrepresentation, while it would be difficult for people here, people in this audience, to think of me as a soldier, and they would feel perhaps comfortable with the idea that I'm a terrorist. In a post-9/11 world, it's meant to explain a lot and it explains nothing.
A word that my readers would use is murderer. You were charged with murder of several people.
I had a very strong experience about labels and what they mean when I was at a workshop in Northern Ireland, and I was sitting around the table and there was somebody there who'd been a British soldier, Pat had been in the IRA, and somebody who'd been the loyalist paramilitary in the UDA. I could have been all their sisters. I could have been their mothers. I could have been them. And at that moment, the labels are gone and they're just human beings because of what they've been through.
Does it not seem to Miss Berry that she may be an apologist for one of the most horrifying crimes of this century?
I'm true to myself and I trust my inner impulse.
It seems to be great psychotherapy for you, and it seems to be a great confessional for Dr. McGee, but I'm not quite sure what the rest of us are getting out of it.
I think I'm actually quite a challenging option for Pat. I actually think he's extremely courageous to sit with me. He said many times that it'd be much easier for him if I'd met him with anger and with political debate. But the fact that I listened to him, gave him respect right from the beginning, that was harder. You can probably gather from what Pat said that, at times it is hard to face me. And the more he knows me as a person, and the more he knows about my father, the harder it is to know that he's hurt me. He lives with that contradiction, that difficulty. We have this tension between us of that all the time.
Well, one thing that hit me after, I couldn't tell you when exactly this happened. You talked about your father, and I got more of a picture. It was a human being who had shaped you. In other words, all the things that I would admire in you came in some measure from your father. That meant this was a fine human being, and I'd killed him. So that's heavy, gives you a measure of the loss. And I end up now a very conflicted person. Conflicted because while I can look at the past and have an understanding that we had no other option, I also know and carry this heavy burden that I hurt human beings. Doesn't matter that they wore uniforms and that we can justify, I can justify actions in the past. I hurt human beings, and I carry that burden. And meeting you puts your father there too. He's a human being to me now. He wasn't a human being before. He was that demonized enemy. He was, he was a Tory. But that's what you've given me.
"40 years of killing each other and hurting each other before we came to a position where we said, well, we better get in a room somewhere and begin to talk about this."
We started to find agreement about how we would talk. Very practical things. How many days a week? Where would we meet? Who would be there? How many people would be there? What shape would the table be? All very practical things. And people got fed up. They said, these people aren't serious, They used to laugh about talks, about talks, about talks, about talks. But actually it was really important. People often say, oh, they can't talk because there's no trust. Trust is an outcome of a context like this, not a prerequisite for it. And trust comes because I say to you, will we meet at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? And you say, could we make it 9:15? I say, okay, we'll make it 9:15. And tomorrow morning, you come at 9:15. And I say, okay, I can trust her.
تقوم من النوم من شباك غرفة النوم بتشوف الجدار الفاصل اللي يبعد حوالي 50 متر عن بيتنا. انتم موجودين في عناتة، قرية فلسطينية تقع ضمن حدود القدس. احنا بنعيش في هذا البيت منذ 16 عام. احنا عايشين انا وزوجتي وكمان 5 أطفال.
يعني بشعر دائما بخوف على أولادي، خصوصي بعد اللي صار لنا يعني. احكي بقدرش عنك.
وبتطلب مني أطلب من عبير إنها ترجع على البيت بعد الامتحانات مباشرة، لأنها بدها تتأخر وتروح تلعب فطلعت علي بشكل كيف الأطفال بيعملوا وحكت لي راح أتأخر وظلت نازلة. كانت في طلقة واحدة استقرت في رأسها، رصاصة مطاطية كسرت الجمجمة عندها فوراً. فهمت إن في زماننا لا يوجد معجزات، يومين وهي تناضل من أجل البقاء حية، لكن للأسف رصاصة هذا الجندي كانت أقوى من جمجمة عبير الرقيقة. ماتت.
They said there was a bombing in Beni Yehuda Street. My wife said that someone saw Smadari going down the street and she's worried. Eventually, you find yourself running in the streets, going from hospital to hospital, from police station to police station. Later that night, you find yourself in the morgue, and the finger is right between your eyes, and you see this sight which you will never be able to forget for the rest of your life. And your whole life is changing completely from one minute to another. She was 14 years old. She was a very sparkling and vivid and beautiful young girl. She was an excellent student. She was a swimmer. She was a dancer. We called her the princess. What else do you want to know about her? She was 14. I think the natural and the immediate response is anger and hatred. You know, most people choose this way, this path of revenge and retaliation. And it's very, very natural and it's very obvious. But then after a while, you start asking yourself questions. How could it be? What can cause someone to be that angry, that mad, that he's willing to kill himself with little girls?
لم أفكر في الانتقام على الإطلاق.
After our tragedy, a photographer from the Washington Post, she sent it to us. We didn't know she took the picture. This picture right here this is Abir, daughter of Bassam. She was shot by a rubber bullet,
rubber-coated metal
and
bullet.
he just shot her in the head from a protected Jeep biker schoolyard.
We both lost our daughters. We both paid the highest price possible. Our blood is the same color. Our pain is exactly the same pain, and the tears are just as bitter.
أولها أنا بقيت رافضة يعني انجنيت أولها من الإشي اللي بقى يمشي فيه يعني لأنه إحنا طول عمرنا مسالمين طول عمرنا بنحب السلام يعني تمشي في السلام وبتآمن في السلام بالآخر بنتك تروح يعني صار عندي رد فعل فظيعة طبعا هو تقبل ويعني احتواني بس بعدها فترة يعني هيك قعدت وفكرت إنه يعني عبير مش أول طفلة فلسطينية تقتل على يد الاحتلال ولا راح تكون آخر واحدة.
And I think the most important question that you ask yourself is what can you do personally in order to prevent this unbearable pain from others.
نعتقد كفلسطينيين أن لدينا الحق في النضال، لدينا الحق في استخدام السلاح، لدينا الحق في مقاومة الاحتلال بكل ما أوتينا من قوة، ولكن وصلنا إلى قناعة بأنه غير فعال. نحن نخلق مزيد من الضحايا ومزيد من الألم لأنفسنا وأيضا للآخرين، ومستمرين في هذه الدائرة من 100 عام.
And the turning point was a year later, when I met the leader of the Families Forum, who invited me over to watch a meeting of this group of crazy people. I saw people who paid the highest price possible, who chose the way of dialogue instead of hatred. But then I saw the Palestinian bereaved families coming down from the buses, coming towards me, shaking my hand for peace. I'm ashamed to say I was 47 years old at the time. It was the first time ever in my life that I met Palestinians as human beings, as people who carry the same burden that I do, as people who suffer exactly the same way. I was completely shocked. I saw people, human beings, not as workers in the streets, not as terrorists, not as news items, as people. I discovered people like Bassam Ramin, who is for me more than a brother today. And the old Ramin could never have met him.
Finding peace in communities in conflict is finding ways that individuals and, even more importantly, communities find ways of repairing and rebuilding their relationships with each other.
How do you repair that kind of damage that has been done? And I think the only way to do it is through sharing experiences, sharing stories, developing empathy and understanding. So it's a very human contact is required. I think it has to happen on the community level, face-to-face level.
Okay, nkibona Beata nk'umuntu wari waramuhemukiye we atazi ko namuhemukiye yabanje kunira ubwoba nibajije uko ndi umutinyuke abandi bumuhere kugira ngo ntinyuke mubwire icyaha namukoreye cyari cyo. Ndavuga nti yema dati yewe ndi umwe mu bantu baguhemukiye kabisa nakwiciye famille y'abantu 5 ubwo yahise yikubita hasi amera nk'upfuye none nangira ubwoba ndirukanka
hashize iminsi ansanga mu rugo arambwira ati Beatana n'ubu ngubu kuko ntabwo urumva wampa imbabazi namwe ntumva mu maso ibyo ntibihagije ahubwo nawe wakwica ugapfa nta n'ikintu umaze kandi koko numvaga yapfa
noneho ndatinyuka ndavuga wenda nyice nk'uko namwiciye nanjye nabonishe bari abantu yambabarira atambabarira ariko noneho ntago nshika atamaye imbabazi kuko nyina ashaka imbabazi kugahato byanze bikunze kunumva ko kubabarirwa ari bwo buryo bworoshye bwa mbere bwo kubana nabo nasanze amahoro. Ubwo noneho ntago naje musaba imbabazi naraje ndabwiye noneho nabura idire ndafunguwe ntago nagahinze nta kintu nakoze reba ukuntu wama icyo kurya
ariko uje kuntuka cyangwa uje kuncuhurira nsubiye muri kamere mbega urumva ko byacitse ese mubwe ntaruko buto ntasone mu gihe ubundi ubwo mvuye imbabazi cyangwa ukwiriye abana si abanyarwanda se bazi ikisi ese baragututse ese bakoze iki tugenda tubiganiraho gutyo ariko nkumva ntibinambamo
numva amajwi menshi y'induru zo mu Kiliziya Kinarama itariki 15 ubwicanyi bwo bwabaga cyane cyane amajwi y'abana kuko nkunda abana cyane ndeba nkunda abana umushinzwe abana b'imfubyi muri murenge wa Ntarama birababaje cyane ko nanarishiye ababyeyi b'abana nk'abanga b'imfubyi barangiza nyuma bakabanshinga urumva reba nkuriye nta kintu azi kabisa gufata umpaga ukamutema nka kuriya ayo majwi rero njya nyibuka njya nyumva cyane induru zivuga ngashiguka hejuru cyane cyane y'imvura igwa umva baranyishe umva nshigukiye hejuru ariko ngira ntisubira nyine bya kigabo nkifata ariko nkuko mwanyibajije kare burya ntikabura umuntu aribuka niyo mpamvu no kwibuka bitazavaho nubwo bavuga ngo kwibuka no kujisha n'ibindi kwibuka n'ibizashira burya yabacitse kwicumu bibuka nanjye ndibuka
nabiriya ntibiba bimworoheye se kumva baca hariyo ninde wishe buriya musore ninjye wishe abantu byo biroroshye
bwa kane nibwo nagarutse arambwira ati ndamubwira nti mbabarira narabikubwiye bigenda gutya mu nota byumva neza ariko ndagarutse kuko mbona ari ngombwa kugira ngo mbabare ko naguhemukiye nakwiciye abantu.
What allows one group of human beings to annihilate another group is if they find a way of dehumanizing them. Now, you do that taking aspects of yourself that you hate, that you feel are bad, despicable, and you want to disown them, and you put them into the victim. Then the victim is experienced as a disease or a scourge and can be annihilated. For forgiveness to occur, the process must be put into reverse, so to speak, because where the victim has to see the perpetrator as not all bad or evil, and this can occur if they see that the perpetrator shows genuine remorse, guilt, and takes real steps to repair or rebuild the damage they've done.
My mom's body was maimed. It was just in a small dish with another woman. and it had just covered with a little soil on the top of her body. She was still clothed, but she was hit on the head and the hands were cut. I was numbed. I couldn't understand how they could kill her when she was feeding almost everybody in the village. My mom was like the grandmother of all the children in the village. So whoever was feeling hungry, she was ever there. And most of the kids were coming rather to see her. She was simply loving and generous. Even the killer of my mom said she was feeding him alongside her own sons. I just cried. I buried my mom. I could find the body of my younger brother. Buried the body of my younger brother again. Then I returned back to Nairobi. Yes, I was terribly angry. Angry against everyone, angry against the leadership, angry against the church, angry against the neighbors. I couldn't sleep. I could sleep and have a nightmare of him. I was carrying him all over. My mind was full of him. He was in prison, but I was his prisoner because he was tied on me and I couldn't separate myself from him. Before I entered the prison, I said, God, give me enough strength so that I won't faint in front of him. Then when he entered, I felt like a huge power just pushing me from behind. When I looked at him, I hated him most, and I wondered why I came to see him. But when I realized that he was shaking from the toes to the hands, to the mouth, to the lips, I had some pity on him. I said, this guy might feel what he did. I asked him how he was. Amakuru, what news? Then I told him that I came to know the truth about my family so that I can know how to give a decent burial to whoever he might know where he might have been left. Then he went back in 1994. He was just saying without stopping every detail of how my family was killed, how they fled, who killed in my village, everything, which really made me say, this guy is not cheating me. For the whole 3 hours, I felt he's the only person who told me the whole truth I was needing. Because without him, I could have never known what happened to my family. My extended family, my immediate family, every detail. And I could know how my mother was killed. No one wanted to tell me that. Truth is also liberating because my mind was always wondering, what happened to my brother? What happened to my sister? What happened to my nephew, to my niece? And really knowing what happened to my family. And I can carry on in life, which makes me much stronger. Then I asked him, in case my mother came back to life and was sitting on your side, what would you tell her? I wanted him to say he was sorry. He told me that he would tell her to give him money. I said, why? He said he was poor. Then I asked him what he would tell my mother if she gives him the money. Then he said, I will ask her to come to visit me. What else will you ask my mother? I was hoping for the third time, at least we ask for forgiveness. He was shaking. It means he was recognizing what he did, but he couldn't express it. He was too afraid. Then he said, I will ask for forgiveness. I told him that I came to see him to give him forgiveness on my own behalf, on behalf of my family, and on behalf of my mother.
Here in Rwanda, there are some remarkable examples of people who have been able to somehow have some form of individual reconciliation with people that were involved in killing their families. But they are a minority, and I don't think they're representative of how the majority people feel. In the experience of my own wife, she knows the man that killed her mother. She's met him and doesn't feel hatred, doesn't revenge, doesn't interact with him on a daily basis. I wouldn't say that there's forgiveness there, but it's certainly not hatred and revenge either. It's a coexistence that allows society to function. And I think that's the key to the future of Rwanda, that it's held long enough through the political and the community situation that it gives the second generation a chance to live together without that division and hatred that could lead to another spiral of violence.
Two years ago, I was giving a lecture at the American Embassy, and there was a Palestinian sitting in the audience, and he kept looking at me, and I knew he wanted to say something, and I asked him, what's going on? And he said, you know, the day before your son was killed, I went through that roadblock. David was killed by a sniper. And this beautiful young man, David was very tall, came to the car, and he said, look, I have to look at your papers. For me, it's like paying income tax. I'll do it as fast as I can. It's my duty. And they started to talk, and then he drove away. And this Palestinian said to me, and you know, Robbie, the next day when I heard he was killed, I was so sorry. Because that's the human face of the conflict. This pain is the pain that everybody experiences. David was a student at Tel Aviv University. He was 27, and he was doing his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was called up to go to reserves, like everybody here. And he came to talk to me, and he said to me what to do, because he was in such a quandary. You see, we look at the world with black and white. Nobody sees the gray. Nobody understands what this kid who belonged to the peace movement and was torn, what shall he do? And then he goes, and I was filled with dread. And then he gets killed by some guy who had seen his uncle very violently killed when he was a small child. So this Palestinian man, went on a path of revenge, and David was in the way, and 9 other people, and he killed them all. They asked me if I wanted to go to his trial. And I had no desire to do that at all. It doesn't give me There's no punishment. Will that bring back David if I feel good about the fact that he's rotting in jail and his mother is sitting in Silwad without him? She's lost a child also in a way. So what joy could that bring me that he's sitting in jail? No. I didn't even get involved in that side of it at all. The memory for me is David sitting down there and going like this when he drove off. That's much more important for me. It's strange because when the army came to tell me that David had been killed, the first apparently thing I said is, you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. What revenge could I take to bring David back? You could take anything from me and everything if I could just once more see him and once more talk to him. So I'm very worried and reluctant to use the word forgiving. Is it giving up your right to justice? Does it mean that it's okay what they did or they can do it again? Or do you forget? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I know that the sniper is on the list to be freed, for Gilad Shalit, for the soldier. And I know absolutely, here I'm being honest, they must release him if it will bring back this kid. Firstly, no human life, the sanctity of human life is much more important than any small revenge that I might take. And when you think about the generations of children and grandchildren of these prisoners who are so angry and want to revenge, then what is more dangerous, releasing them back into the community or facing a further generations, 2 or 3 generations of revenge? So I say, and I've said it on television many times, that you must release the prisoners.
Because these are issues of relationships, they're only ever going to be solved by people talking with each other. In other words, force and violence is never going to bring a resolution of the problem.
This is a place where Israelis and Palestinians are meeting each other for peace. You can always cross the wall. You can go under the wall, you can go behind the wall, you can go above the wall. This wall cannot stop 2 kinds of people. The one determined suicide bomber will find a way to go through, and the one determined peacemaker will find a way to go through. But I think the basic reason behind it all is prevention of any kind of dialogue and knowing each other. And this is something that for me as a peacemaker is essential to go to, even at the price of breaking the law. Am I afraid? No, I'm not afraid. As I said earlier, the worst thing already happened.
It's easy to say forgive and forget. It's very hard to achieve that. It is not improbable that one of the Palestinians today would have been killed by me 10 years ago. Then he wouldn't be with us, or I wouldn't be here with you today to do this joint activity. אני פה. רגע, דבר איתי. רגע, זאת הפגנה שקטה, בואו נקים את המאחז פה. תעלה למעלה. אני רוצה להגיד משהו. תעלה למעלה.
זה שעומד שם ומנפנף את הדגל שלו מול העיניים שלהם,
לעמוד שם.
אני לא זה שהולך להסביר לך את זה. לא רוצה להסביר לך.
אם יש צו שטח צבאי
לא מעוניין להסביר לך. קחו את עצמכם, תלכו אחורה.
זה שטר הבעלות על הקרקע.
אני לא מתווכח איתך, אני מתווכח איתך ראשי, אבל אני מדבר אליך כפי שהחוק מחייב אותי. קח את עצמך, תלך מפה.
לא, מסתיים.
This is a mission. This is something that I have to do. This is the reason for me to get out of bed in the morning. This is the meaning of my life after the death of my daughter. We can change this endless cycle of ours, and the only way out is the ability to listen to the pain of the other.
When all the other extremities are passed away and you go beyond the story to where there is nothing left but the two people, and you feel that what you are meeting is the other person, then I think reconciliation, forgiveness, bonding, and even love begins to happen.
mbona kubabarira ari ngombwa kuko utababariye nsanga isi yakongera ikoramo abantu bose bashira nk'Icyenda-4 ngewe kumwakira byarampenze ni ibintu byavuye kure nta n'uwigeze abinshyiramo nta n'iki n'Imana yonyine yabikoze gusa kubera ko twari twaramaze gusenyerwa nageze aho mubwira umubare Manuel nkubwire abana banjye ntibazagaruka ngiye ku bwanjye ndakubabara sinzongera no kubabazwa nawe nugira igare uzampeke tugendane ningira icyo nkurusha nzagufasha nta bindi